let's talk about schools reopening for all of the senior students, those students from forms 4 to 6. The Ministry of Education has announced they can all return to school regardless of vaccination status. And we'd go through the press conference where the Minister of Education said that, because she pointed out some interesting developments and statistics around education that led to the government changing their policy decision on the matter. And I think some of those differences are very important, and also some of them were spoken about by other people, those other people being me, were spoken about quite a while before. And I think some of these things require a more proactive approach, not just wait and see, because in part of the conference the minister said that they were kind of giving it a 2 weeks wait and see approach. But I think the conclusion at the end of the 2 weeks was an obvious conclusion before the start of the 2 weeks, and just allowing it to go on like that just exacerbated some negative fallout from it. And now we still have to go back to the same thing that many people were asking for from the very beginning. If you haven't clicked that like button or tapped that like button, please do that now at the very beginning of the video, because I can tell you are going to like this video, or you are going to appreciate it, so I can predict the future and tell you you should tap that like button now. And drop a comment if you have something to say. Tell me what you think. Did you miss me? It's been a while since I made a video, but there are only so many hours in the day. Someone who's a regular viewer of my videos told me that they were washing wares and were expecting to turn on my video to, pass some of the time, and it was not there. So my humble apologies if you had a time slot there waiting for some of these videos and they didn't come. But unfortunately, as I said, there are only 24 hours in the day. I think I maybe need somewhere around mid-30s. Hopefully. But let's get into the media conference and see exactly what the Minister of Education said about this reopening of the forms 4 to 6s.
Data from the Ministry of Health as of October 19th, 2021, indicates that 49,853 students, which is 54% of our students aged 12 to 18, have received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, and 36,540, which is 40%, have received their second dose. Data collected by the Ministry of Education as of October 10th, 2021, indicates that 30% of the Forms 4 to 6 cohort is at this time fully vaccinated. 34% of denominational schools have reported that more than 50% of their Forms 4 to 6 students are fully vaccinated, while 1% of government schools indicated the same.
At the very beginning, I think that little bit there is one of the most key pieces of information given out in this press conference. If you have 34% of the denominational schools, that's around 1/3. A third of the denominational schools were reporting that over 50% of their senior students were vaccinated. And 1% of government schools were reporting the same. That is a massive difference. That is a chasm, and I'm sure the numbers would be widening going. And out of the 1% of government schools, that 1%, I would presume, I don't know the exact number of government schools, but I'd presume that 1% may actually mean literally one school. That's what I'd presume. And if I were to guess which one of the government schools was the one school that had over 50% of their forms 4 to 6s vaccinated, I'd guess Couva Sec or Couva East Secondary, because that's the government school that's been performing at the level of the denominational schools and better for quite some time. And when you look at these things, that 34% in denominational schools to 1% in government schools, that answers one of the pressing questions. You see, many people ask, and many people talk about, and many people make it seem like they don't understand what causes these things. When people talk about the prestige schools and the not prestige schools, and wanting your child to go to this school and not that school, there's a reason for it, and you can see it there. And if we are being honest, vaccination of children, in this case, vaccination of children involves parents. This isn't the case where these children are picking up themselves and going to vaccination sites across the country and getting their own injections. No. Every child that has been vaccinated would have been carried by their parent, or at least given permission by their parent or guardian. So if we are looking at the schools and seeing 34% of the denominational schools has that level of vaccination, that means it's a parenting difference in the schools. The difference you see between the denominational schools and the government schools isn't a children ability thing. We could look obviously at this at 34% to 1%, a third of a difference between these two types of schools, and the difference has nothing to do with children's natural ability. The child who got vaccinated wasn't a bright child. It wasn't because he was so smart and his natural IQ is somewhere up in the high 150s. That has nothing to do with it. Vaccination status has only to do with parenting and which parents were willing to carry their children to be vaccinated. Now, you could think what you want of the actual reality of vaccinating a child, and I have my own views on that, but if we look at it from the educational perspective, it is obvious that the parents that send their children off to denominational schools, the parents are the key difference there. And if you are a parent looking at this, keep that in mind. Whether your child goes to a denominational school, a government school, any school, the key are the parents all the time.
Attendance data collected over the past 2 weeks has shown that school attendance is consistently lower in the government secondary schools, with an average of 50% of the eligible cohort attending school physically. For the denominational and private schools, the attendance averaged 80% of the eligible cohort and continued to increase. In some cases, the attendance was as high as 95% at the end of the 2-week period.
Not only in the denominational schools, you have a higher percentage of the students vaccinated. Not only that, of the vaccinated students, you have a higher percentage of them turning up for school. So that's parenting again. I was once a school child. I was once a schoolboy in my khaki pants and white shirt. I was going to school too. And I could tell you, I could not stay home without my parents' permission. Now, I'm not yet speaking about whatever alternative learning some people may or may not have been doing. We were just talking about the literal attendance to school. And if we see the number was 80% attendance in the denominational schools and climbing versus its 50% attendance in the government schools. And this 50%, bear in mind, again, to explain it well, this 50% are 50% of the eligible students. So these are of the vaccinated students, which are over 50% in only 1% of the schools. And let's do some extrapolation. This wasn't said, but it can be surmised from some of this. Remember, they're grouping all the government schools and grouping all of their data in one batch. So if we're having 50% turnout out of all the government schools for the eligible students, that 1% school, the 1% government school that had over 50% vaccination, I hope you're following all these numbers I'm saying. The 1% of government schools, this one school, that I would say is Kuvasek, that one school that had the over 50%, what attendance do you think that one school had? I would suppose that one school would have had closer to the 80% attendance of the denominational schools because it had closer to the over 50% vaccination rates of the denominational schools. So if we have that overperformance of that government school And I would surmise there may be an overperformance of some other government schools. What that seems to suggest to me is that there would be some government schools where it would be even lower, much lower than that 50% attendance, even of eligible students. And again, going back, attendance has nothing to do with the student's natural ability. We're talking the difference between these so-called prestige schools and the government schools here, what would have once been known as some of the junior sects, etc., etc. The difference there, these two key differences that the Minister of Education spoke about, had nothing to do with a child's brain ability and mental ability and ability to decipher logic. It had to do with parental decisions. In this, a very interesting part to take note of is also the fact that the attendance increased in these prestige, denominational schools and private schools. The attendance increased. So what that would mean is that although it started at 80% with some apprehension, over the 2 weeks' time, the parents were paying attention. Because very likely, if the attendance increased, what that would say is that some parents were looking at it and they were doing their own evaluation, they were doing their own 2 weeks waiting period without the government, and they were looking to see, let's see how it goes. And as it seems to go well, they were sending their children out. So these parents are obviously paying attention. Another key, if you're a parent or a parent to be a parent or someone who's wishing to be a parent, these are the keys here.
The result of these trends in vaccination and attendance is that teaching of the Forms 4 to 6 cohort is taking place mainly online. Analysis of the results of the SEA and CXC examinations in 2021 provide evidence of the globally predicted decrease in student performance, which can be attributed in part to students' absence from the physical school environment during the pandemic. In SEA 2021, 1.5% more students scored over 90% when compared with 2020. However, 6.7% more students scored under 30%. In CXC examinations, the results of which were released on October 15, 2021, 7% less students obtained 5 CSEC passes or more in 2021 than in 2020, and 1.3% less acceptable grades were achieved in CAPE 2021 when compared with 2020.
What this is telling us, 1.something% of the students in SE got over 90%. That's an increase in the performance at the top end of performance, but 6.something% got below 30%. So that's a decrease of performance at the lower end of the performance scale. The distance between the two is increasing. What that is saying is students, or some students, with the parents obviously, who are paying attention, are actually improving and excelling at schooling in these difficult times, even with all the unique little changes that we have in education. They're actually performing better than the students the year before. It's a year-on-year increase in performance, and that tells something, because as I said in the contemplation on this very same topic, it didn't need to happen that way. It could have very well been that all the students did worse than the year before. That might have actually been expected by some, that as this challenging time continues, the students who have had more time taken away from their normal schooling and in this new changed form could be expected to do worse than the other students. But that wasn't the case, at least not for everyone. Some students are doing better, and that is correct according to at least some of the anecdotal comments I've seen, where some parents, some students are saying that they were enjoying this online school system. It was more suitable for their style of learning. And it's unfortunate for them that now the entire thing is going to change. But such is schooling, I guess. Especially when you're schooling in large groups as public schooling, you cannot get things to your specific needs how you'd want it. And that's, again, where parents who pay attention come in. You look at your child, you see where they're learning best, and you try to mold their education along those lines. In the results there, she spoke also about the fact that CXC and KEEP saw a reduction in the quality of their work. In the grades in CXC and KEEP, there were more students who did worse. But we haven't yet heard how many students did better. And I would guess in CXC and KEEP that the results would be similar to SEA, where a smaller number of students would have actually done better than the year before. Because in this type of schooling, it's much easier for some people to get more specific. If they have parents who are paying attention, it's much easier for them to get more specific in the style of learning that would be more suitable for them. So it makes sense that some students are doing better. But in the long run, in the grand scheme of things, when you look at all the students, it's an overall reduction in performance.
The following decisions have therefore been taken to guide the operations of secondary schools for the duration of Term 1, 2021-22. 1. All students of Forms 4 to 6 or equivalent, regardless of vaccination status, are required to attend school physically for teaching classes, practicals, and school-based assessments from Monday, 25th October 2021. 2. Schools are not required to provide online classes or synchronous sessions for students of Forms 4 to 6 or equivalent in lieu of student attendance at physical classes. All students are expected to attend school physically. 3. Schools are required to place special focus on the completion of practicals and school-based assessments for students of Forms 4 to 6 at this time. 4. Students at special schools, along with their support staff, are allowed to attend school physically according to suitable rotational schedules devised by principals. 5. Students of Forms 1 to 3 or equivalent are required to remain engaged in remote learning. Unless otherwise advised, these students will return to the physical classroom in January 2022, which is Term 2 of academic year 2021-22. 6. Principals may request permission from the Ministry of Education to have their Forms 1 to 3 students physically visit the school for orientation exercises during Term 1 if required. ECCE centers, primary schools, and tertiary level teaching classes will continue to operate remotely at this time.
Forms 1 to 3 students. I saw a comment in one of my TikTok videos in the contemplation on this, and a student said that he went that very morning for his first dose, and if he knew, if he saw this before, he would not have done it. First off, I think a problem is being created when people are looking at a health decision within the lens of an opportunity, in terms of I need this in order to do these things. They aren't making the health decision based on, is this best for my health? Would my body react better with this medication? And I don't think that's a healthy way for us to be looking at health decisions. Healthy way to look at health decisions, yes. I don't think it's a healthy way. And some of it is coming from the politicized nature of this whole topic. That has gotten way too politicized. And when you see people refer to the unvaccinated and the tone they say it in, you understand that it's left the scope of just health and science a long time ago. And that making those decisions contingent upon getting opportunities and reaching further in life thwarts and twists the whole balance of how we are supposed to make healthcare decisions for our lives. I don't like it. But on the other side, that does seem a bit unfair. And you could feel hard done by if you are a parent thinking, I don't really want to vaccinate my child. I don't think my child is at high risk of this new virus. I would rather wait. But I am also a parent who thinks my child would learn best in in-person schooling. And I would love for my child to have the opportunity to do this. So, you know what? Against even what I would really want, I would go and get them inoculated. So you go do that and you're expecting school to reopen soon and your child to be back out there. You may be making plans to return your working life to a different schedule, and bam, you hear this announcement that Forms 1 to 3s would be continuing the online learning until the new term. Many students from Forms 1 to 3 would have been vaccinated already. And I think that would be some disappointment. But again, when you're dealing with decisions on this group stage, the individuals often get crushed, and your individual disappointments don't matter in the grand scheme of things. Because as I said, I saw someone, to be sidetracked from that and go back to that point, I saw someone on Twitter commenting, they don't understand what madness is this going on. How does this even make sense? When they were commenting on just the headline where all unvaccinated students would be allowed from Forms 4 to 6s. And I could tell they didn't listen to the news conference, or they probably didn't even read the article, because you could see why. The minister explained why. Remember, Tutor already said they weren't going to be teaching online classes anymore. If you want them in school, it's either or. They would teach the in-school classes or they would teach the online classes, but they won't be doing both for those senior students. And in the case of what the minister is speaking about, if you're looking in government schools and seeing that in the first place, the vast majority of government schools, 99% of government schools, do not even have over 50% of their students eligible to be in the school. And then of those less than 50% of students, most of them aren't even coming to school. The attendance records is dismal. So if you're saying you have no idea what this is for, on a country scale, on a society-wide scale, what do you think is going to happen if students who would already be coming from more disadvantaged and unfortunate circumstances, if those kind of students are the ones that have no schooling now, at the age of Forms 4 would be 14, 15, somewhere there, going up in age. They have no more schooling. They have left the formal schooling sector. And if their parents, I'm not saying this for all parents, this is obviously a generalization. I do not know the specifics of every situation. But if their parents, their parents, weren't willing to vaccinate them, weren't willing to send them to physical schooling. And if you followed my channel from a while back, and when I went through the previous Ministry of Education press conference, the attendance records in the online schools was also dismal for the government schools. They weren't even attending online schools. So they aren't vaccinated, they aren't going to school, they aren't attending online schools. So what do you think would happen to the entire country if a government leaves that to happen? Even one term of that, more than is needed, is asking for some horrible things to happen. Further on in the conference, the minister took some questions, and one of the questions stood out to me, and I really liked her answer for it. One of the journalists asked, as these unvaccinated students are returning to school, if the ministry would be putting some extra effort in getting more teachers vaccinated. Now, first off, I don't think that the ministry has much say in the matter. I think if the ministry could have, they would have already done something to attempt to get all the teachers vaccinated. But as we see, the teachers union isn't incapable of doing things to support their teachers. And I believe nearly all unions are fiercely against any kind of coercion into vaccination or forced vaccination. And I'm in agreement with the unions on this, just by the way. But I enjoyed her answer on it.
Is there going to be a bigger thrust from the ministry or the government to get more teachers vaccinated?
At this time, the government has done all it can to provide the vaccines for both teachers and students to be vaccinated. It is down now to the choice of our citizens as to how they want to be able to interact in the public space.
And I hope that our entire government could take more of a policy like this. I know it could sound scary for some, but if you're being real, you being fearful isn't good reason to dictate what other people do with their life. And if we have that as the criteria, that if I'm fearful for my life, I should be able to force other people to do things with their life, that's a scary part to be. So I agree with the minister's stance, and I hope that it could be our entire government stance. We have provided the opportunity, we have provided the knowledge, the education on these things. It's up to individual choices now. Tell me what you think. Drop in the comments, tell me what you think about it. Do you think it's a good idea for all these students to return to full in-person, face-to-face teaching? The minister said that most of the stakeholders in the education system were asking for this. They preferred teaching their students face-to-face. I spoke with a teacher, well, not me, but I overheard a conversation with a teacher, and that's what she was saying too. She would rather any day go back out to school and teach her students, see the faces in person. So tell me what you think. Do you think that's a sensible thing? Or would you have preferred the return to full online schooling and let everyone do that? Or, as some teachers may have been saying, that they take the time to change and revolutionize our present education system to successfully do the hybrid system. Do you think that we could have even done that? Do you think that our ministry has the logistical capability to even change our secondary schools into effective hybridized learning centers where the online teaching could actually be effectively used? Or was it really the best decision? Everyone back to school and learn in the classrooms. Tell me what you think. Drop that comment. I hope you were educated, informed, or entertained, and I'll see you again in the next video. Hopefully a lot soon.
Feel the music, rising with the time.